By the end of this video, you'll know everything you need to start crafting the weapons you want in 6 steps and in the most efficient way, while also having an understanding on how the crafting system works in Darktide. So let's get it on. Step 1. Have the weapon you want to craft unlocked. Certain weapons are gated behind a character's trust level, and the same weapon might have a different unlock level for different classes. You can find the full list on the Gameslatern website, which I'll link in the description. Step 2. Level up your weapon mastery. Leveling up your weapon's mastery allows you to unlock more and better quality upgrades, as well as reach higher tiers of power score. There are 2 ways you can level up your weapon mastery. The first is just by playing with it and completing missions. Obviously, higher difficulty missions will give you more EXP towards your mastery. But the second way can potentially be a lot quicker if you have an excess amount of resources to spare, and that's by using the sacrifice system. At Hadron, you can sacrifice weapons you don't want and break it down into weapon mastery for any weapon you want to level up. There are only 2 things to note. First, only green weapons and above can be sacrificed. The higher color quality of the weapon, and you get a little more mastery EXP out of it. But the most important thing is that sacrificing weapons within the same weapon family as the one you're trying to level up gives you 5 times more EXP. Keep this in mind to really accelerate your mastery process, and make sure not to throw weapons that you are trying to level up as well. Step 3. Evaluate weapon stat distribution. This is a very chunky step to learn at first, but once you've got the idea and know what to look for, the actual work involved is about maybe 5 seconds of your time, so pay attention here. All weapons have 5 stat modifiers that can vary in potential. The goal of this step is to check whether the weapon in question is worth further investment. If it doesn't live up to your expectations, get a better statted weapon and then proceed. How do you know if a weapon's stat potential is worth investing in? There are 2 things you need to pay attention to when it comes to this. The first is the weapon's starting stat allocation, and the second is its maximum potential. The starting stat allocation is only important if you intend to use the weapon in combat as is. However, the most important thing to look at is its maximum potential. These are the outer numbers of a weapon, and its stat potential caps out at 80%, even though the calculations on the back end are made based on a stats potential of 100%. Just for some knowledge here, all weapons have a base stat attached to them. The numbers you see in the stat modifiers tells you how much extra stat improvements you'll get based on its current stat allocation. So, for example, let's say a recon lasgun has a base damage of 50. The calculations behind its damage stat would look something like this. So, if the recon lasgun had a maximum damage potential of 60 at 80%, then the numbers would look like this. This means that even if the damage stat was 0%, your recon lasgun won't be dealing 0 damage. It would just be dealing its base damage only. Another thing to note, all stats, even at 0%, still does something for you, though some effects can dip into the negatives at lower stat percentages. How do you know which stats to look out for? As a rule of thumb, a fully empowered weapon has a total stat distribution of 380. That means you can spread 380 points worth of stats across your different modifiers. If you were to max out the potential of all stats as best as possible, you would have a distribution that looked like this, where 4 of the 5 stats have reached the cap of 80% and one of them is 60%. The total stat points here would add up to 380. With this, the question then becomes, which stat should you keep at 60%? This stat is known as the dump stat. In the vast majority of cases, the stat which you can afford to keep low tends to be the mobility stat. Why? Because mobility has a minimum effectiveness threshold of, I think, 50 or 51%, I can't remember which one it is. At these percentage levels, you obtain the most effective dodge counts that the weapon can unlock, and therefore gives your weapon the most opportunity to avoid attacks. Anything higher than 50 or 51% doesn't add any more. Additional sprint speed and dodge distance is nice, but not nearly as important as effective dodge counts. Watch my beginner guide to learn more about this if you are interested. Now, this is just a rule of thumb. Not all weapons need to strictly follow this distribution. A quintuple 76 spread is technically the most balanced distribution of stats possible, where all stats are close to the cap, and you can get this if you value the other elements from your mobility. Outside of this rule of thumb, there will certainly be exceptions, and it's going to be a case-by-case basis on which stat is going to be the dump stat, or if there are other minimum threshold stats that you want. Step 4. Consecrate your weapon. Once you've found a weapon with stats worth investing in, you can proceed to upgrade it in various ways, the first of which is Consecration. In the upgrade flow, always consecrate your weapon first. To consecrate a weapon is to upgrade its color quality, which allows you to fit more perks and blessings into it. The reason why you want to consecrate first is because it is more resource efficient to do so. It costs you less materials to consecrate a lower power ranking weapon than it does a higher power one. Step 5. Empower your weapon. Empowering your weapon means to level up its power score, giving you marginal stat increments until it reaches its cap value in the stat modifier for a total power score of 500. Assuming you've done step 3 and have found a weapon you're willing to invest resources in, adding more stats will help marginally until you can reach certain stat breakpoints that will be impactful. Mobility is an example mentioned earlier, where 50% is the minimum that you want to aim for. A vast majority of weapons will benefit from hitting the 500 power score cap, but there are some builds and weapons which benefit from keeping certain stats as low as possible. The Foresword is an example of this. Min-maxing players might want a Foresword for a build with as low warp resistance as possible, since it allows them to use the Foresword as an additional tool to build up a good chunk of peril to benefit their talents and abilities. Step 6. Tweaking perks and blessings. While you're in the midst of gaining mastery for your weapon, you'll be jumping in between step 5 and 6 a lot, adjusting your build as the potential of your weapon reaches new limits. However, if you've already got a weapon that has been fully empowered and consecrated to the max, then the real nitty-gritty min-maxing will take place through your perks, blessings, and of course, your character's talents. How you choose the ideal perks and blessings for your weapon will depend on what you want to accomplish. Personally, I'm pretty bored and uninspired of always going for the min-max builds, so I prioritize interesting and fun builds over absolute optimization. As a consequence, my builds tend to be more varied rather than always following the same recommendations that you might encounter elsewhere. I know my numbers, I just choose to use them differently. A piece of advice I'll give you is to let the blessings dictate how you want to use the weapon, and then adjust your perks to round up the remainder of the build. If a perk helps you kill a specific enemy in one less hit, then your adjustment has made a difference. Otherwise, it's all about reducing variance in your performance. From here on, repeat the cycle with all the weapons that you find interesting to play with. You'll obtain mastery over everything in your arsenal over time from just enjoying the game. I'll give you a demonstration of me upgrading a weapon from scratch to help you visualize the process.
I exist to serve. Completed. Processing. We require additional data. Processing. Processing. Will there be any units? Completed.
Finally, here are some small tips to help you progress when it comes to crafting. Have a set of farming curios that have the plus EXP and plus dockets to help your progression and resource collection. This is not necessary, but it does help and add some meaningful progress over the course of your grind. The next tip is that you can break weapons down for materials. The higher the weapon quality or color, the more materials you'll get. This means even rubbish weapons that you pick up from your missions have some use even if they aren't going to be used or sacrificed. And finally, be sure to try different weapon marks. You might not like one mark of a weapon, but you might enjoy using the others. The Psychus Foreswords are a good example of this. The Obscurus mark is just not great to use, but the Deimos and the Elisi marks are wonderful to play with. So, when it comes to Darktide's crafting system, that's pretty much everything you need to know. Resource farming aside, once you've found the perfect stat distributions for the weapon you want, getting a perfect roll literally takes less than a minute to craft. This new crafting system has made it so that the grind isn't the focus of the game anymore, and instead, it actually places the gameplay back into the spotlight. I only wish this system was out on launch, where Darktide might have been an even bigger game than it is today. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Varlets.